The pod cracked open like an egg, and cold air rushed into my lungs before I was ready for it. My name is Vrel. I am a scout of the Ashenu hive, and I was drowning in silence. Not real water. Something worse. The underscent was gone. For the first time since I hatched, I could not feel my sisters in my mind. No hum, no queen's voice telling me I was safe. Just the ringing quiet of a broken escape pod tumbling through a debris field, and my own heartbeat, loud and alone. Alarms screamed in a language that was not mine. Metal groaned somewhere behind me. I pulled myself out of the smoking wreck with 4 trembling limbs, and found myself standing in a cargo bay that smelled of oil, metal, and something warm I could not name. A human stood in front of me, blocking my path, one hand raised, palm out. She did not look afraid. That surprised me more than anything else that had happened in the last hour. Her name, I would learn later, was Ivy Marsh, and she was the only crew member awake on the night shift of a freighter called the Molly Ann, when my pod slammed into her ship's hull like an unwanted knock on a door. I braced myself for violence. Everything I had been taught about humans said they were unpredictable, fast to anger, dangerous in ways my hive could not fully calculate. My hive had lost 3 scouts to human patrol ships in the last cycle alone. I expected to be the 4th. Instead, Ivy lowered her hand slowly, the way you would approach a frightened animal, and said one word. Easy. I did not understand the word. My translator implant was cracked from the crash, and only worked in flashes, spitting out fragments instead of full sentences. But I understood her tone. It was the tone of someone trying not to make things worse. She backed away first, giving me room, and pointed toward a corridor. Then she pointed at herself, and mimed walking, slow, careful steps, showing me where she wanted me to go instead of dragging me there. I followed because I had no better option. My pod was dead, my hive was 3 days away at best speed, and without the underscent, I could not even signal them properly. I was alone on a human ship, injured, terrified, and the only creature offering me anything other than a weapon was the very species I had been trained to fear. She led me to a small room with a single door. Inside was a narrow platform covered in soft cloth. I did not know what it was for. I assumed it was some kind of examination table, and my body tensed, ready for restraints, for tests, for the kind of things captured scouts whispered about in hive reports that never quite got confirmed. Ivy pulled back the cloth covering and patted the surface twice. Bed, she said, and even broken as my translator was, that word came through clean. I did not move. She sighed, sat down on the edge of it herself, bounced slightly to show it was soft, then stood and gestured again, more insistent this time. Not a command, an invitation. I have replayed that moment more times than I can count. The moment I decided to trust a species my hive had marked as unpredictable and dangerous, not because I had proof she meant no harm, but because I was too exhausted to keep standing, and something in her face looked like the way my own sisters looked when they were trying to comfort a hatchling. I lay down. The cloth was warm. It held a shape, softly, the way water does but without the cold. I felt my body sink slightly, cradled instead of pressed flat against hard metal. My antennae, which had been rigid with fear since the crash, began to relax against my will. Ivy did not leave. She pulled a chair from the corner of the room, turned it to face the door, and sat down with her arms crossed, watching the entrance instead of me. I understood, slowly, what she was doing. She was standing watch, not over me as a prisoner, over the door, so that whatever came through it would have to get past her first. No one in my hive had ever done that for me alone. We are always watched, always protected, but it is the whole hive protecting the whole hive. One great tangle of sisters and queen and underscent. Safety in numbers so large that no single sister ever has to carry the weight of guarding another by herself. Ivy carried it alone, on a metal chair, for a stranger who did not even share her language. I fell asleep before I meant to. When I woke, sunlight I had not expected on a ship this deep in space was pouring through a small window, and Ivy was still in the chair, head tilted back, clearly having dozed off sitting up rather than leave her post. My internal clock told me 9 hours had passed. 9 hours. On my own ship, among my own sisters, wrapped in the underscent. I had never slept longer than 2 hours at a stretch. Something in my body always stayed alert, always listening for the Queen's voice, always ready to move. I had believed, my whole life, that this was simply what rest was: shallow, watchful, necessary but never deep. I had never known this kind of sleep existed, the kind where your whole mind lets go because something outside of you has promised to hold the watch instead. Ivy woke a few minutes after me, blinked twice, and smiled when she saw me sitting up. She said something my translator caught only in pieces, but the meaning came through anyway. Good, you slept. I did not have words for what that sleep had done to me, not in her language, and barely in my own. But I understood, in that quiet room with the strange soft cloth and the small window, and the tired human still rubbing her eyes, that something in me had changed that could not be undone. 3 days later, a hive shuttle found the Molly Ann, drifting near the debris field, and retrieved me. Ivy walked me to the airlock herself. She did not ask for anything. She did not try to keep me as proof of contact, or study me, or trade me for advantage the way my hive's intelligence reports always warned humans would do. She simply said the word she had taught me on the first night, softer this time. Easy. Then she let me go. I carried that word, and that memory, all the way back to the cradle song, and straight into the presence of the Queen. You must understand what it means to stand before the Queen of a hive. She does not listen the way you listen. She takes the whole of you at once, memory and scent and feeling, all of it flowing into her in a single long moment of understanding. I had prepared a full report on human ship design, weapon systems, and negotiation patterns. I had 40 points of tactical data ready to deliver in proper format. She barely touched any of it. She stopped on the bed. I felt her turning that memory over inside her own mind, slow and careful, the way you would turn over a strange stone found on an unfamiliar shore. She asked me, without speaking aloud, how long I had slept. 9 hours, Mother, I answered. Alone? She asked. Unguarded. Yes, Mother, but not truly alone. She sat watch. She gave up her own rest so that I could have mine, and she asked for nothing back. The Queen went very still. In 11 cycles of service, I had never felt her go that still. You woke rested, she said. Not simply repaired, rested. Yes, Mother. I need you to explain this to me, she said, and there was something in her voice I had never heard before, something close to hunger, though not a hunger for food or territory. A hunger to understand something she had never had access to before. I tried to explain it as best I could. I told her about the soft platform, the warm cloth, the chair turned to face the door, the way Ivy had not tried to force me to trust her, but had simply acted trustworthy, until trust became the only reasonable response left to me. I told her that in 11 cycles of hive life, wrapped constantly in the underscent, surrounded always by sisters, I had never once felt as safe as I had in that small room, with a single tired human standing guard. The Queen was quiet for a long time after that. Long enough that other officers in the chamber began to shift uncomfortably, unsure if something had gone wrong. Finally she spoke, and this time her voice carried through the whole communion channel, reaching every sister currently linked to the underscent across the entire fleet. Send me the measurements, she said. The platform, the cloth, the exact way the door was left open, the angle of the chair, all of it. I want it copied. Mother, I said carefully, it is only furniture. No, she answered, and I felt something almost like grief pass through her. It is a place where a mind can let go completely and trust it will still be safe when it wakes. We built this entire hive on the belief that only the underscent could give our daughters that feeling. A stranger gave it to you in a single night, with nothing but cloth, warmth, and her own body sitting sentry in a chair. I have 1,000 daughters who have never once slept without listening for danger. I want them to know what you know now. Word spread through the fleet faster than I expected. Not everyone agreed with her. Some of the older officers argued that the underscent was already perfect, that adding human comforts to hive ships was an insult to generations of tradition. One captain, a stern old sister named Threll, argued loudly in the officer channel that soft platforms would make our scouts weak, slow to react, vulnerable in a crisis. The Queen answered her personally, and I was allowed to witness the exchange. "A scout who sleeps 2 broken hours a night for her entire life is not strong," the Queen said. "She is simply tired in a way she has never been allowed to notice. Strength is not the absence of rest. It is the presence of enough of it." Threll did not have an answer for that. Within 2 cycles, soft platforms began appearing on hive ships across the fleet, built from the measurements I had carried back from the Molly Ann. Doors that had always sealed completely were modified to leave a small gap, the width of a human hand, because I explained that the sight of an escape route, however small, had helped calm my racing mind that first night. Watch rotations changed as well. Instead of the constant shared vigilance of the whole hive at once, small groups of sisters began taking turns, simply sitting near each other, while one slept fully, deeply, without needing to stay half alert. The results came in slowly at first, then all at once. Scouts who had never slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch began reporting 6, 7, even 9 hours of true rest. Ship efficiency climbed in ways our engineers could not fully explain through normal calculations, because they had spent years optimizing engines and weapons and had never once considered optimizing the quality of a sister's sleep. Mistakes during long patrols dropped sharply. Sisters who had always seemed a little on edge, a little too quick to react, began to soften in ways that made the whole fleet feel different somehow, calmer, steadier. I was given a new assignment during this time, one I had not expected. The Queen asked me to serve as a liaison between the hive and the crew of the Molly Ann, since I was the only sister who had any real experience with human customs, and more importantly, the only one who had earned Ivy's trust. I returned to the freighter 3 months later, this time not as a crash survivor, but as an official envoy, carrying a message from the Queen herself. Ivy met me at the same airlock where she had let me go, and her face broke into a wide, surprised smile when she recognized me. "You're the bug," she said, laughing, then quickly covered her mouth, embarrassed by the word. I did not mind it. My translator had improved since our first meeting, and I understood both the word and the warmth behind it. I delivered the Queen's message in person, standing in the same cargo bay where I had first stumbled out of a broken pod, shaking and alone. The message was simple, but it carried weight I could feel in my own chest as I spoke it aloud. "Your Ivy taught my hive something our own signal could never teach us," I said, translating as carefully as I could. "We are in her debt, and my people do not forget a debt like this one." Ivy laughed again, a little embarrassed, and said the same word she had said to me on that very first night, the word that started everything. "No problem," she said. I asked her, through my translator, if she understood what her small kindness had done. If she understood that an entire fleet of ships now had soft platforms and open doors and quiet watch shifts because of one tired human who chose not to raise a weapon when a stranger fell out of the sky and into her ship. She thought about it for a moment, leaning against a stack of cargo crates, arms crossed the same way they had been that first night in the chair. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just didn't want you to be scared alone, that's all. That's all." I have turned that phrase over in my mind many times since, in the same slow, careful way the Queen turned over the memory of the bed. For Ivy, it had been such a small thing, an ordinary kindness, the kind of thing she probably did without thinking twice, the kind of thing humans do for each other every day without expecting a fleet of alien ships to change because of it. For my hive, it changed everything. I stayed on the Molly Ann for several weeks that visit, helping to smooth communication between our two peoples as trade routes slowly opened between hive space and human territory. I watched human crews work together in ways that reminded me, strangely, of my own sisters, arguing loudly one moment and covering for each other's mistakes the next, always circling back to that same simple idea Ivy had shown me. Watch out for each other, ask for nothing in return. Let the trust build on its own. One evening, a young engineer named Callum asked me why a hive scout would want to spend her free hours in the crew lounge instead of resting in the small cabin they had prepared for me. I told him the truth. I had grown used to being watched over, and the lounge, full of tired humans laughing over cards and sharing food that smelled strange but pleasant, felt closer to that feeling than any quiet room alone ever could. He seemed surprised by the answer, then simply pulled out a chair and slid it toward me without another word. That was the moment I understood the lesson went both ways. My hive had learned something from a single human's kindness, but I was learning, slowly, that humans built their comfort the same way we once thought only the undersent could, through small repeated acts, done again and again until they became habit, then culture, then something people simply called home. A senior captain named Priya, who ran the trade negotiations for that sector, once asked me directly if my hive intended to keep expanding these customs, or if the changes would fade once the novelty wore off, the way she said many new ideas do among her own people. I told her what I had seen with my own antennae. Ships that had once run on strict, exhausted efficiency were now running smoother, calmer, with fewer errors, and far fewer tempers lost during long patrols. Sisters who had once treated rest as a weakness now defended it fiercely, the same way Threll had once defended tradition. Priya nodded slowly at that, the way humans do when they are turning an idea over in their mind, and said that maybe her own people could learn a thing or two from a hive willing to admit it had been wrong about something so basic as sleep. I also watched the way humans slept, when I had the chance to observe it, and understood finally why Ivy had known exactly what to do that first night. Humans do not have an undersent. They do not have a queen's voice constantly reassuring them that they are safe. Every human learns, from the very beginning of their lives, that safety is something you build with other people, one small act at a time, one open door, one shared watch, one quiet word meant to calm a frightened stranger. My hive had built safety through biology, through the undersent binding every sister together in constant contact. Humans built it through choice, over and over again, every single day, with no guarantee that anyone else would choose the same. I began to understand why the Queen had been so struck by that first memory. It was not simply the comfort of the bed itself. It was the discovery that safety built through choice, freely given and freely returned, felt different than safety built through biology alone, deeper somehow, more resilient, because it did not depend on staying connected to a signal. It depended only on one person deciding another person mattered. Before I left the Molly Ann that final time, Ivy gave me something small to take back to my hive, a piece of the same soft cloth from that first bed, folded neatly into a square small enough to fit in my carrying pouch. "For your queen," she said, "so she knows it's real, not just a story you're telling her." I delivered it personally, and I felt the Queen take it into her own limbs and hold it there for a long moment, longer than protocol required, longer than I had ever seen her hold anything. "Tell her," the Queen said finally, "that her kindness now sleeps in 1,000 ships across our fleet, and every daughter who rests easy tonight rests easy because of her." I carried that message back across the stars, and I have carried it with me every day since, through every new assignment, every new ship, every new sister I meet who has grown up sleeping soundly on a soft platform she has never once questioned, never once realized came from a single human woman who simply did not want a frightened stranger to be scared alone. I still do not have a word in my own language for what happened in that small room on the Molly Ann. My hive has since created several new words to describe it, terms for chosen safety, for rest given freely, for the particular calm that comes from trusting someone who owes you nothing and helps you anyway. None of them quite capture it the way the memory itself does. Some nights, when I am far from home on a scouting run of my own, I still think of that narrow platform and the tired human sitting watch in a metal chair, arms crossed, facing the door. I think of the word she taught me before I even understood a full sentence of her language. Easy. It is such a small word. It carried an entire empire's worth of change inside it, and neither of us knew that on the night it was spoken. I do not know if Ivy ever fully understood what she started. I do not know if she thinks about that night often, or if it simply blurred into the long list of ordinary kindnesses she has shown to strangers throughout her life, the kind of thing that feels unremarkable in the moment, and only becomes remarkable later, when you learn what it grew into. But I know this. Every sister who sleeps soundly tonight, across every ship in my hive's fleet, sleeps a little easier because one human, on one ordinary night, chose kindness over fear. And somewhere, light years away, on a freighter still making its slow, steady rounds through human space, I hope she is sleeping just as easily herself.